we'll start. So I'll cook up the other PowerPoint. And so effectively, this is really, because we're going to do the heart dissection in the lab. I have a handout for it. So I got to explain all this. Very, very much so. I have to give you some context about the chambers that are there and the anatomy. And I have a YouTube that I use, which is for the sheep heart, but it translates to the cow heart that we're going to do. We probably only have 2 of those to do. So we'll make the most of it and sort of the orientation of what are called the great vessels and the flow of blood. And I brought different color markers. You don't have to thank me. It's all part of the service. So I said, we're all assembled. 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and she's here. She didn't even say hello. But I digress. Okay, first things. Like a lot of other structures, like we looked at joints, the idea of that, I want to make sure she doesn't, this is my wife, that's what is he doing this. So that in joints you had a tough outer layer and a different inner layer. This is not a whole lot different than that, in the sense that the pericardium, and it's not going to be, I don't think it's there on the sheep hearts itself, but the pericardium has really what binds it inside the pericardial cavity where the heart is. It has a fibrous layer that's very protective in nature. There's a modest amount of fat that surrounds the heart that protects it as well. So this pericardium on the outside is very fibrous and strong. You know, I mean, you have a context for that with like the dura mater. This is much stronger, the nature of that fibrous pericardium. Inside, so that's something that's on the wall of the cavity, and then we have 2 additional layers. One is on the heart, and one is basically on the internal aspect or the deeper aspect of the wall. So you have the parietal layer and the visceral layer. So this 2 layers of serous pericardium. Serous because it secretes a serous fluid, which is really just it's almost liquid, just a tiny bit of protein. So it's not really viscous or sticky, something like that. It's probably akin to cerebrospinal fluid, but the idea of that moisture is very assistive and lubricating because your heart's beating constantly that are there. The same thing, again, you're going to see when we look at the heart from a muscular standpoint, it has 3 layers anatomically. It has the epicardium, which is effectively this visceral layer. The lining is simple squamous. The lining on the parietal layer is simple squamous. And when we get to the lung, you're going to see the same thing with the pleura. Okay, the pleura has a parietal layer on the chest wall, on the internal aspect of the rib cage. Okay, and that has a simple squamous lining that secretes pleural fluid. And then on the lung itself, it has, if it had the name of epipleurium, it would be adequate. We just call it the visceral layer, meaning on the organ itself. And so here, the pericardial fluid fills this space that's there, called the pericardial cavity, and it's all about friction. And when it becomes inflamed or irritated, those linings, we have pericarditis. We can have an excessive amount of fluid form, okay? Probably, but you could listen to me just instead. I don't have a lot. I'm talking, we don't really have anything there. And here's the visceral layer on external surfaces. I'm going to draw on the board mostly. That's why I'd forgotten about that. But do that I forget all the time. I'm trying to figure out what driver's license. My wife is on a mission of mercy. Trying to get this lady who didn't renew her license for a large number of years to get back and drive. Particularly after she gifted her car. God bless. 2 layers separated by a fluid-filled pericardial cavity, and it's about friction. This is the illustration. There's not a lot to say. This is the fibrous layer, the way they designate it. This is the more delicate lining. It's not a whole lot different than a synovial lining in a joint or in the material in the cerebrospinal fluid. It's a lubricating fluid. Cerebrospinal is a little more complicated. That's there. And so you have the epicardium is the outer layer. That's simple squamous. The endocardium, that's simple squamous. And again, why those linings are really smooth linings. The best analogy I do 1,000 times. Same thing on the interior of a blood vessel is this. It's like the top of this was on the table. It's smooth. It rolls without incident. No friction. And the same thing here. Blood and fluid. We want things to operate smoothly and effortlessly. If there's little bumps and irregularity, that's a problem. If there's irritation, things can stick together or things can become inflamed. There's all sorts of bad things that happen when things don't work properly. On the interior, the endocardium is continuous with the lining of blood vessels. Anything that makes blood cells rather, stick together causes clots. Clots are a bad thing when they start forming in heart and blood vessels. It causes turbulence. I mean, again, the distinction is it's very Kennywood. It's the difference between raging rapids and then over at Sandcastle, lazy river. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Many of you are Pittsburgh people. All I know about raging rapids is when I would be in there, my kids would stand at the top and shoot water. It's Dad, go get him. Everybody, blast my dad. These are my children. Yesterday, my eldest, along with 40,000 other people, ran 26 plus miles in 4 plus hours. The other people I did it faster. That was the people in DC for the Marine Corps Marathon. He was sore after that. Something about a 43-year-old body. I can't relate to that anymore. So pericarditis, inflammation of the pericardium. And you can, I don't have the year for it. It's called a friction rub. Fluid, another name for fluid is tamponade. And a tamponade basically forms this large amount of fluid that doesn't allow the heart to expand. Okay, so it leaks into the pericardial space for whatever reason. Okay, and so you have to aspirate or pull out that fluid, or else the heart doesn't work properly. If you don't do it, that's going to be fatal. It just is. So again, the outer layer is the epicardium, which is truly the visceral or the layer on the exterior of the organ. You're going to hear about visceral layer of the pleura. You're going to hear about the visceral layer when we get to the peritoneum of the serous pericardium. The myocardium, we'll look at the musculature in a little bit. Circular or spiral bundles of contractile muscle cells. And so understand there's also a cardiac skeleton. Really, there's 3 different kinds of cells that make this up. You have structural cells, which is this fibrous skeleton. That's what you're going to see the valves anchor to, the great vessels anchor to, aspects of the conducting system anchor to, and all of the muscles anchor to that are there. Crisscrossing interlaced layer of connective tissue, cardiac fibers, vessels and valves. And what you're going to see down the road is the reason when we start looking at really what happens electrically, when we start looking more at the physiology, action potentials, which I'm sure you're familiar with, effectively are when we tell our muscle to do something, whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, the action potential is this shock wave, for lack of a better way to express it, that goes through the muscle or wherever the structure is, the nerve, and basically tells it to fire. And so in the heart, we want it to be very, very specific because it has to fire in a sequence. You're going to see some relevance of that shortly. And remember the one with bone where it went this way and that way? This is like, I love this. I mean, that, I can get, literally and figuratively, I can get close. I love those. A little bit short. My wife's so mad with her. So the other nutty son. So here it is. It's a 2-stroke motor. Okay, these are the upper chambers where I'm going to draw shortly, the atrium. Okay, they're squeezed first. All they're doing is topping off the tank. The tank are the lower chambers, the ventricles. So the atria, what's little is left in the atria, it's only about 20%, are squeezed into the already 80% filled lower chambers when we get into cardiac cycle, which is more phys than anatomy. And then the signal that causes them to expire gently, relatively slowly, this shoots down the divide here, which we're going to get to anatomically discuss, all the way to the bottom or the apex of the heart. That way. And notice that spiral activity of the muscles. And remember, the blood vessels go out this way, not out the bottom. And what they do is effectively they force that muscle out because they fire so rapidly, and they're able to very efficiently empty those ventricles to the appropriate degree. Because it's not just folding it up, it's spiraling it up. It's like you get a wet bath towel. It's like you're at the beach, you're at the pool, and you're drying off and that towel is wet. I mean, how do you get the water out of it? Yep, right? Where they have one of those like ringer things you used to have in the old, out there, and you can do that. And if it's sopping wet and you hung it up, I mean, tomorrow it'll be sopping wet. See? Good work. Well done on the design. It didn't help you much with the Steelers last night, but we digress. The most expensive defense in football can't stop anything. It's okay. Don't be angry. Life is like that. So that's that illustration. So the endocardium is the innermost lining. Again, it's called endothelial. It's continuous with the endothelial lining. That's where we're going to blood vessel after this. Lines the heart chambers, covers the area of the valves. Very importantly, same illustration you saw before. That's there. Now we get into the chambers. I love this. Are you ready for Stein's bad artwork? Of course you are. It's like the original Saturday Night Live. They had a skit that they used to call Bad Ballet. So if you're, there's any way you could draw it. It's simple enough to draw with a box diagram. First, we start with the divides. So even though they're not to scale, the upper chambers are considerably smaller, very, very much smaller than the lower chambers, as you can see. This is preparatory for our dissecting part today. So you have, and you already should know these. If you look at it this way, you can see here on the right side of the heart, the left. So as you're looking at it, so I was standing up doing it, the right atria and left atria, and the right ventricle and left ventricle. Got that business done. So again, receiving chambers. Now understand, if you go back and look at that, we all know the great vessels, going backwards, are coming in at the top. Well, originally, that wasn't necessarily during the earliest stages of development. This is kind of what happened. So for our visualization purposes, we're going to show exits here, and then we're going to start to show the entryways here. Same thing here, I'll get to this. So we're doing it that way. As you'll note, when we get to when we really look at the anatomy, you're going to see that this is the aorta, this is the pulmonary trunk. Here. So look what happens. Imagine, look at this thing, it's pumping constantly. If you think of coming out of the left as the aorta, coming out of the right as a pulmonary trunk, it's almost folded up on itself, that spiraling action of the muscles. Over time, it sort of does this. So the muscles are almost coming together and crisscrossing. But understand, the left side is extraordinarily, this is 3 to 4 times as muscular. The left ventricle is the right. So this side is going to contract first. And so when you look at the heart, and you get the anatomical orientation, the vessel that you're going to be looking at on the anterior aspect, on the front-facing aspect, is going to be what we call the pulmonary trunk. behind that, even though it's larger, is the aorta and its branches. And that's what they're depicting here. This is called the aortic arch. This is the pulmonary trunk. This is what you'll see becomes the left and right pulmonary arteries. This is the inferior, superior vena cava. The inferior will be down here. That's not pictured. And then going up and above is the aortic arch. And down when we get to blood vessels, you're going to see the cephalic, this is the common carotid, that's the subclavian on the left. Right? Easy. I know this, you can know this. So we'll start here. So it's all about flow traffic. So the right side of the heart is receiving venous blood. So coming in, and it doesn't really, and it flows naturally in there. Okay, you have two vessels, which I'm drawing in blue because venous blood depicts. So I got them, and they got pink. Nice to see you. So incoming here is what vessel? I just told you. Venous blood's coming back. This is the superior vena cava. Cavernous vein. And that is draining, the term that we use when we talk about veins, just they drain. Less blood and other fluids that are coming back be recirculated, but first they have to be oxygenated. This is literally the end of the systemic circuit and the start of the pulmonary circuit. This is draining the head neck and upper extremity. Torso, effectively, the torso, lower extremity, much larger, the widest of all the blood vessels, the diameter. Bringing all that is the inferior vena cava. The VC is there, and that's torso and lower extremity. You'll notice it doesn't require any valves. The flow, and we'll get into why that's the case. Okay. We do not have to control it. It flows continuously, and if it doesn't flow, obviously there's a problem, but on the entry areas into the right atria, there are no valves. Yet, indeed, there is another area of entry. We always forget about this, but it's not the case. When we look at the back of the heart, let me rephrase it this way, the heart is selfish. Don't blame it. It's got to work constantly. It doesn't get a day off. It doesn't get a second off. Okay? It is, so it feeds itself by way of something we're going to look at, probably won't get to it today, called the coronary, we'll probably get to it, the coronary circulation. When someone has a heart attack, we say they're having a coronary. So they have coronary arteries. 5% of your circulation goes to the heart to feed it normally. So it comes back by way of something called cardiac veins. In the nomenclature of anatomy and arteries and veins, typically they have the same name. Radial artery, radial veins, ulnar artery, ulnar veins, okay? Femoral artery, femoral veins, right? Only two areas where it's not like that. Carotid artery, shall give it. Coronary artery, cardiac veins. On the back of the heart, you're going to see a little opening from where the veins collect. All those cardiac veins come in. It's called the coronary, important name for folks anatomically, sinus. That's 3 entry points of venous blood coming in. Those are all venous blood. They're coming from the coronary sinuses in this context, as you're going to see when we talk about blood vessels, are widened, flattened blood vessels. They're collecting all the blood from the cardiac circulation and delivering it back to the right atrium so it can all be reoxygenated and off we go again. So that's the last portion of blood coming in, so to speak, from the end of the systemic circuit. So this is from cardiac circulation. Right. Now, Now we begin to control the flow because it's all about one-way flow. And one-way flow is about balance. So we have, in between here, we have balance. So the valves are kind of like this. Really want to go in. You have questions about the mechanics and the pressures of valves. You know who has done research, published research on valves? Forces that are on them. That's right. A Liverpool fan is having a very bad week in the last couple of weeks in Boston. This has a name. Okay, this valves, I'll show you the illustrations. So valves, when they're open and blood's flowing in, flowing through, they look kind of like this. When they close, they're like doors that slam shut. So I'll give you a better view of what valves look like. So here's the opening, they're like little cups. Okay. And what happens when pressure builds up and they close, and you get to the cardiac cycle, it's like, they almost look like this. The cup ports kind of slam against each other like that. Pardon my bad arbor. So that's open. And they're one way, so the blood flows in. This one doesn't have two flaps, it has three. So we call this the atrioventricular valve. And I'll get into the dividers in a minute. The atrioventricular valve, okay? On the right side, between the right atria and the right ventricle, ensuring that it flows in, but make sure it doesn't flow backwards under normal circumstances, which is a problem. And because it has three flaps, it's got a name. It's called the tricuspid. Yeah. To anatomists, it looked a little bit like the top of a tube, a tricuspid tube. Got it? Good. Three cusps. So valves normally do this. Sometimes valves inherently are very, very stiff and narrow. They have a very difficult time opening. Like this, we call them stenotic. Stenosis is too tight. Okay. Sometimes the valves are damaged, and typically this is due to infection or something you're born with. Okay. So then we just have a faulty or a weak valve. And sometimes, okay, the structure that you will come to know that anchors those valves, you see there's little strings that come from here and here. They're called chorda tendon. They're like guitar strings. You'll see them on this harp as you look at them. They're tendinous cords. And the little guitar strings, is the best analogy for it, are holding it down, and they're attached to muscles. They got the name tendons because they're attached to muscles. And these muscles bear the name. See, it's also called papillae. That's muscles. A lot of anatomical terminology here. We're test taking pleasure. Thank you is all part of the service. So that's called the tricuspid valve, and it ensures one-way flow. What happens in the cardiac cycle, when the signal goes to the ventricles, they power up, they pressurize. And remember, we're getting back to, ideal gas law, ideal fluid laws, that pressure and volume constant relationship. What happens is it pressures up, causes those valves to slam shut. Boom! See, it happens on both the right and left side, that's the first heart sound. So what happens when valves are faulty, we get irregular heart sounds. Another name for that are murmurs. Thank you. Ointments. Mild lungs. Not hot. Hardly mild neighborhood, but that's as people spoke like that. And the worst one of these valvular faults is this. Think of this as like an umbrella. What happens when the umbrella goes in the wind? It's almost though the cups kind of go up. that way. We call that prolapse. And as you can imagine, with each one of these can cause a limited amount of flow. This one called leaks, and this is big trouble. Prolapse is almost like it flapped out the other way, because then it means this whole assembly is damaged. Usually you're talking about valvular replacements. Why we choose medically to do valvuloplasties, to remodel valves rather than replace them. Once you replace someone's valves, at least as of now, they are on blood thinner treatment. The idea is that's important stuff. So we ensure one-way flow. Where's it going? It's going to the lungs for more oxygen. It makes it this way, out like so, and there's another valve here, except that valve opens a bit differently. Down the road, you're going to see this has to do with what's called the second one. Okay. Those valves, so that is becoming the pulmonary trunk. Trunk means it's going to divide into right and left. And the name of that particular valve, I know I'm going all over the place here, is called a pulmonic or pulmonary highway. Because it looks like little half moons, there's three of them. Pulmonary, semilunar valve. You can see the way it opens this way. It ensures the blood flows that way on its merry way to the lungs to be reoxygenated. And it's a comparatively short trip. It reoxygenates as we get into the physiology of it. It's an external, very, very rapid. Matter of seconds. Fractions of a second, actually. Because it really does. So that's one of those wonderful built-in safeguards. I mean, if it's transiting that time in a minute, in a matter of seconds, it's reoxygenated. So your lung loses availability to reoxygenate. It's got some time to do its job. Which means we're coming back this way to left atrium. This is the end of the pulmonary circuit, the start of the systemic circuit that we talked about last time. It enters by way of, and another name that we call this, I knew this is the most important part, I forgot it, shame on me. This is oftentimes referred to as the pulmonary artery. Even though trunk is a better term anatomically. It is the only artery, just not everybody, but I got your attention. It is the only artery with deoxygenated. Artery doesn't mean oxygen. Artery means going away from the heart. Veins mean coming back to the heart. So what's coming back to the heart by way of these guys, which are pulmonary veins? Usually there are four. No idea what we'll see on the heart, on the cow. Pulmonary veins, I'm drawing them in this color, and no, they do not have any valves. There are typically twice as many veins as there are for arteries. So if you palpate your radial artery, very easy to get, there typically are two radial veins, at least. That's because if any one time, approximately 2/3 of your blood is in your veins, and only maybe 15% is in your heart. People go nuts about arteries, but veins are really important. And I mean, this is another one. My research is in veins. Okay, that's why Dr. Buxton and I have some stuff to talk about initially. I have an interest in veins for a variety of reasons. Just to kind of clue you in, you know. And again, everything is important to a teacher. Typically see that material again. Can't figure out Dr. Buxton. He knows so much stuff. It's ridiculous. Pulmonary veins. So typically, you always have twice as many. I'm just drawing two for the sake of argument. They're coming back. They're flowing in. Think of it from a gravitational perspective. This is gravity assists the reflow of this. They enter into the left atrium. The atrium is a receiving chamber. Additionally, dump it. Yeah. Additionally, you're going to see down the road, both sides have what appear to be here is, I can't draw it very effectively with my bad artwork. It has expansion chambers called auricles. So the atria and the auricle are not synonymous. The auricle is when there's more blood flowing in, it can expand. Down the road, you will see a span folded again. So we're going to look at it and see something that's unique in there, called pectinate muscles. You'll see that as well. I'll be showing that to you as we move on, because I won't get done with obviously all this stuff today, or this right in this period. So in it comes here, and the left atrium to the left ventricle. That's right, you guessed it. You have another valve, except this valve only has two cusps, and oxygenated blood is going to go through that and make its way out by way of, yes, another valve here, and this very, very famous vessel called the aorta, and these are indeed the aortic semi-lunar valves, and they're going everywhere. All over your body. Semi-lunar valve, we're going to have a room there, and so that's that. They're going all over, everywhere, our body, our brain, etc., etc. Here's the name for this. It's called the bicuspid valve. Very important. That's the one that usually has most of the problems. Why? Another name for it is the mitral valve. Why is that? Pose the question, why is it called a mitral, M-I-T-R-E? What's a mitral? No takers? Valves kind of looked a little like this. They weren't really, there's only two of them, and they didn't have the semi-lunar shape like that. They sort of were more pointed. It appeared to the anatomy to be sort of this within the valve. It looked like a hat. Who wears a hat that looks like? I'll phrase it another way. You play chess. Who has a somewhat pointy hat? Chess piece. Rook. Knight. I heard that. The bishop. Look like a bishop's hat. Okay, the badges of office for a bishop in Catholic Church are two: his staff and his mitre, the hat. Pope's got one of those. Not the late Frankie Red Shoes. But the late Pope Francis. That was his that's his email. Frankie Red Shoes at Yahoo. Did you know he was a really interesting guy? He used to drive a motorcycle, really, from Argentina. Because he's coached soccer and stuff like that. You know, he had in the back of his t-shirt, you can see this, the nun fell off. We used to have appreciation for bad. So that's the badge of office of a bishop, or the pope, or anyone. They have the mitre and the staff. Just in case, hence the name mitral. You guys just don't appreciate this, but this trivia that no one else possibly knows. The question you should be asking yourself is, why does the Jewish guy know so much about it? Oh, why not? It's a wonderful book. It was written in 1950 or so called Cardinal by Henry Ward Robbins. It was made into a decent enough movie that was too hard to pack into a movie. And my mom loved the book. My mom read 3 books. Never spent a day in college. Very, very great. And so when she said, and I decided to read, I really liked the book. So the movie first, and very, very interesting. Very, so it depicted like it was a fictionalization. Kennedy's up in the cardinal in Boston was very famous, whose name escapes me, but he was like the cardinal for the Kennedy family back in the father Joe, and then all the Kennedy kids. And it was kind of taken off as a story of his life. He was involved in. They took it to some very interesting areas, the Deep South, the onset of Nazi Germany, all that type of stuff, all of these events. So, yeah, I had an interest in that. A lot of that comes. Remember that house. My sister, who's 80, was an English teacher by trade. I mean, it was a readathon in our house. She brought home. She was. I think she was in high school when she brought home. One of course, they had Jansen's History of Art. Every art, and he went to History of Art in college. I was like college course, high school. Yeah. And she brought home. I proceeded to read it cover to cover. How does that keep? Sorry.
No, that's cool.
It's me. Oh, yeah, it's me. So that's why I know so much. Besides the leading figure, you know, a nice Jewish boy got a little different. He stayed in the family's carpenter business. Could you see it? Joseph and Son, carpenters. Imagine what they'd have to do. Nice boy, should have stayed with his dad's business. So, I don't know. I'm sorry, please, I'm not trying to think. If my wife finds it funny, and she's very religious, didn't go to that Thursday night Bible study group for nothing. That's what I'm trying to find out about the driver's licenses. It has to be just helping. Bible. Join. Okay, and so that takes you out to the body. That's the name of the vowels. You got everything. Okay, the dividers are important. Okay, these are called septa. The fibers who see these on the dissection. 38. So these dividers separate the chambers. So this is interatrial, in between the atria, interatrial. This is interventricular with a coronary. The reason I'm pointing this out, the main coronary arteries and the main cardiac veins, ventricular, down is where these divides are. Think of them as indentations, and the blood supply basically traverses them and then breaks off and branches to the interior. So this is the interventricular, we call it septa or dividers. Septum would be the singular, and this one, very, very famously, is called the atrioventricular septum. So that's really what we haven't even gotten to the back of the heart. The posterior aspect to show you. So you're going to see a lot of these kinds of things. Thank you. Yes. As we move forward. So here we are. The same things: atria and ventricles, the septa, the fossa ovalis. The pediatric heart, the fetal heart, famous around here. I talked about it before to you guys. Okay, we talked about anatomy. Okay, we talked about a foramen ovale. The remnant of the foramen ovale. There's one obviously in the sphenoid bone, the whole trigeminal nerve, that deal. Okay, V3. You should know that for the test. Okay. Yep, the mandibular branch of the, you have a test Friday. The remnant of the foramen ovale from the fetal heart, and what happens, it forms a little wall. That little opening is supposed to close completely, and it's got indentations called the fossa ovalis. I don't know. I doubt that we could dissect what the heart has, or what the cow has. I think that would be hard to find without really, the cow heart's huge. Okay, that's what Chris Letang has. It's called a PFO. Okay, a patent foramen ovale. It means it didn't close completely. That's why he popped a couple of clots. Turbulence goes through there, goes from, because the mom breathes, the baby's lungs don't need to work. They just develop, and when they don't start to work, baby is born, smack the kid, get them to breathe, however they do it today. Child abuse. So the remnant of the foramen ovale of the fetal heart, that's the fossa ovalis. And you're going to see a whole lot of these. The septa, they appear in these diagrams, and they are quite large. You can see the dramatic increase on the left side, 3 to 4 times as muscular. You can't miss it. Here are the valves. Here are, as you can see, the chorda tendineae. Here are papillary muscles. The interior, the meat of the heart, so it's carneae and trabeculi. Remember that sort of that network, that honeycomb, and all of this is about volume. It goes back to the same initial concepts in anatomy. Things are folded. When they expand, we don't see all these nooks and crannies, so to speak. They flatten out. Here, those are called pectinate muscles, because they're like little fingers almost. And those are the auricles, where we find pectinate muscles. These are the atria. The atria aren't even nearly this big. Here you can see the valves. See the cup-like shape? So the blood flows in this way, ensuring one-way flow. And when it pressures up, it slams those valves shut. First heart sound. And you'll see what happens. The blood effectively goes down and then comes and pushes back up as it's squeezed out. It's squeezed from the bottom, but its only exit point is here, and it opens those valves. The aortic and semilunar. Here's the aortic one. Here's the pulmonary one. You'll be able to find both of those on the dissection. Out goes the blood. You're going to see, because of these are, you're going to see, we'll learn about, these are called elastic arteries. The aorta and the pulmonary, as well as subclavian and the carotid. They rebound, and that rebound creates a pressure wave that slams these doors shut. That's the second heart sound. And interestingly enough, it creates a unique flow that augments your blood pressure and makes it a whole lot less turbulent. We will get to that when we start talking about blood flow dynamics. That's more physiology. Got it? That's why the anatomy is so important. You can base yourself on that. Then it goes, boom, goes over the lungs. I need some air, get some oxygen, coming back. Pulmonary veins, and it comes down here, out to the rest of the body. This is the distribution system. This is called the aortic arch. There's 3 vessels that go off of it. The first vessels are given off right here. 3 major vessels, the right and left coronary arteries, and you might be able to find those on the dissection, are right at the base of the aorta, just after the valve. Sometimes you'll see little openings where the coronary arteries start. And up they go here. This is all going to the right side of the body, head, neck, upper extremity, left side of the body, head, neck. It becomes symmetric after that, because over time, because the heart's more on the left than on the right, this is just a transit wave. You'll see called the brachiocephalus. We go over all this again. And then this is also known as the ascending aorta. It goes behind the heart this way and becomes the descending or thoracic aorta. And when it crosses over the here's the inferior vena cava. And when it comes out this way down here and pierces the diaphragm, it becomes very famously the abdominal aorta. Same blood vessel, ascending, aortic arch, descending or thoracic, abdominal. And then we'll find the branches. We'll find the renal arteries. We'll find its termination in the iliacs. We'll look at the suprarenals. We'll look at the inferior diaphragm or phrenic arteries. All those names are going to come back at you. You don't have to thank me, it's part of the surface. So the coronary sulcus, that atrioventricular groove, all the way around, and encircles the heart, is where you find a lot of both the right and left. We're going to look at the coronary arteries. I'll show you the sulci, and this is where they're talking about here. This is the coronary sulcus. It's given off right here at the start of the aorta. This is the left, and this is the right. When we will go back to lab, I will tell you about the distinctions between the two. Okay? Voila, we're done. You want to take a picture of Stein's bad artwork, you're welcome to do so. It's on you. I'm not taking a picture because it's Stein's bad artwork. Don't have to thank me. It's all part of the service.